Hi and welcome. We're going to be going over how to build a Demoreel template. So using Adobe Premiere. This template should be used, we're going to be using it mainly in the earlier part of PFP, but you could use it at any point if you wanted to construct a Demoreel. It's basically just going to go over some basics of Premiere itself and simple editing, simple ins and out points, how to set some animation up, how to look at resolutions, aspect ratios, how to scale things down, move it around. So we'll kind of take it as we go, but we'll just start by creating a new project. So just opened up Adobe Premiere, and this is kind of what you get right away. So we'll just say create new project. And right away it's going to open up this, which looks pretty intimidating if you've never done any editing or anything before. So it's basically saying what type of renderer you're going to use. We're going to stay with the normal one for now. Video, time code is always the best way to go. Audio, we'll see it from samples. So it's basically going to sample the medium in which you're bringing in there. And this capture one's mainly if you're capturing from like a display camera that's on your like laptop or something. So we'll leave it alone, or if you have like an external camera. So we're not going to be using any of that. So we're going to call this, let's call this Demoreel test or something along those lines. You guys can actually call it your name. So we'll say OK. Now as soon as we open it up, it should come up as a blank canvas here in a minute. My computer's thinking about it. Might want to wait just a second and stare at our desktop. There it goes. And we're good. So just a quick thing about the interface, because if you've used any Adobe products, they're all very similar in what they do. Premiere is very close to After Effects, and they all kind of use the same terminology most of the time. So there's a couple things that are a little different, but 90% of the time it's pretty good. So the top left, this is considered like your source window. So it's basically anything that you bring in that you don't want in your final edit, that you want to just kind of look at and stuff like that. That's a place you can view it. Over here where it says program no sequences, that's going to be like down here where all your edits are happening, the actual thing that's going to be outputted. And bottom left is kind of like where we all start. So this is pretty much your project. This is actually, it could be a location on your hard drive or something. Kind of think of it like that. So if you just double click inside here, it'll say you can start importing media anyways, media like that. Can't even talk today. Alright, so let's go to, I have a little folder here. So I'm going to start with just teaching you a little bit about bringing in something a little bit bigger and cutting it up. There's a couple different ways to cut stuff up. So a 60-second timer, that's what I got here. It's really simple. So if I just take it and I drag it up here to basically the source, so it's like you bring it in, there it is. And you just hit play. So I want you guys to see it really is just a countdown timer. Now for your final projects for class, most of your assets, we want them to be like under 10 seconds. Because you're only doing 3 of them, and we really just want you to show off what you can get. It should be like a trailer for you is what your demo reel is. So we're trying to get it down to where you can keep the audience interest up. So in the hopes that you get a callback and go in for interview. So obviously this 60-second timer doesn't really work for us. So we need to like cut it up. So I know what you're thinking. You're like, we can pull it down here and use a razor if you've ever used this before, but we're just going to use simple in and out tools here. So it's like we just go down, we'll just scroll to where there's basically 10 seconds. So it's like 11, 10. So accurate, right? Boop. And we'll just hit I on our keyboard. By hitting I on our keyboard, that sets an in point. And then we'll just come over to the end here, and I'm just going to say O. So in, out, and it makes this little gray area. And what we're going to use up here at the top is you can come over here and go to clip, and you can say what's called make subclip. Now as soon as we do that, you'll say, hey, you want to call this, you want to call it something, so we're going to call it just 10 seconds. Kind of makes sense. And we'll just say OK. And now if you look at it, so we were a little off on our 10 seconds, but you can go back and edit it if you want. And you basically just come up here and you can kind of move it to where you're happy with it. So oh, right there's perfect 10 seconds. So let's just get rid of that one and just do it again. All right. So oops, grab that guy again. Gimme. There we go. Make subclip. Now we got a real one. 10 seconds. Keep it nice, even though it says 11, so they're off and then we're on. So so we go back here. The other way you can kind of do it is you can grab this one with the in and out point and drag it down to a sequence if you already have it made, and it'll actually keep it. So the difference is if you make a subclip, it's kind of like its own entity, And if you drag it down into the sequence, it's kind of still referencing the original one. So it really just depends on what you're trying to do. But subclips are going to be probably 90% of the way that you want to go for what you're doing. So now we have this here kind of sit. So we can make folder structures down here at the bottom to kind of help ourselves out. We will do that in a little bit, but I'll keep it exposed right now as things don't look as complicated. So we want to make a sequence per asset. So you're required to do 3 assets in your final project class here at Full Sail. So basically for 3 assets. Now you shouldn't take it as literal as I'm saying it, like PCC 1, 2, and 3 or something along those lines. It should be always your best asset forward. The showstopper should always be the first one. So when I say asset 1, 2, and 3, I'm just saying this is all the assets you've done here at Full Sail in your final project class, and I really just want you to put the best one first. So we could start by just grabbing one of these bad boys like this, and you can right click on it and you can say new sequence from clip. Another way you can do it is you can come up here and you can make a sequence, but this is probably going to be the easiest way. So boop, like that. And now we have a sequence, and you can see it dropped that 10 seconds in. So this could be already one that we like. So I'm going to call this asset 1. So we like asset 1, so we need 3 of them. So just to save us some time, we're going to take it and we're going to duplicate. Asset 2. Alright. And then we'll duplicate it again. Asset 3. Now if you haven't caught on to the pattern yet, so I'm basically using the top left window for just quick checks and editing, and then over on the right hand side now you can see there's a little timeline. That's going to be more of where the final output's going to be modified and put together. So what we're doing right now is we're actually making little sub sequences. Alright, so these all these little guys here are going to be put into a grander scheme. Alright, so we can kind of see that these guys are just chilling here. Now if we looked at their sequence numbering, like this video here is not H2, and it's no way 1080p. So we can now come up here and we can say, we're just go File, New, and we can say a new sequence. And inside here you can choose what basically outputs you want. And I'm kind of already on the one I want. So we're going to do 1080p. I'm going to do 30 frames a second. So then we'll just kind of click it, and you can name it if you want. So I'm going to call this one Final. Now this guy is going to be where everything is going to be housed. So we can start dragging stuff in anytime you want. So you just kind of, you can just drag it over, make sure you're on it. And over here at the tabs at the top will tell you which thing you have active at the time. So now we can just drag asset 1 sequence. Now you can tell the difference between a sequence and a clip by just looking at these little icons. So you can see right here it's going to come up as like a little film strip. And these little guys look like little tiers. I would like to say like Jenga, where they're like perfectly stacked and things like that. So we'll just kind of take that and just kind of drag it in. So it says, do you want to change basically our final sequence to match the settings of the video? And you want to say no. So I want to keep my existing settings because we're using a higher resolution on your final output. So this timer here is just kind of a spacer. We're not really, use it long term. So I mean, if you want at any time, we can go change it too. We're going to change it, but we can change them too at any time. So we can come over here and say, okay, let's go up to sequence. And you can say edit sequence settings, and then you can come in here and you can choose basically the same thing. And we will do this when you finally start replacing stuff, but it's not really something we have to do immediately. So we can just say, okay, thank you, I love you, move on. You want to do it? Yeah. So if you want to double check, always be paranoid is what I say. So let's come in here and say, okay, yes, 1080, got it. And we'll do that for each of the assets, just because I should have probably done it before I duplicated, but repetition is fun. Here we go, asset 3, sequence settings, 1080, boom. So, and then if we want to be really super paranoid, we can just take this guy and just hit delete and just redrag it in to make sure it's using the fresh one. But there we go. So now we have that in there. Now if you, in your final, over here in this little timeline, if you just hit spacebar, it'll start playing. So you can see your countdown timer. Da, 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 da. Kind of reminds me of that game, You Don't Know Jack. It's from like the 80s. I'm sorry. Dated myself a little there. But Now we can take basically the first asset and then the second asset and kind of drag them over, and you can see that you can like tier them on top of each other. And then we'll take the third asset and do the same thing. So we have all three of those assets in. So basically if we just run it right now, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. I should learn to count in sequence. There we go. Cool. So basically showing that each of these little clips are going to eventually be the assets that you have for your final project. Now, there's many ways to do this. We're basically setting this up as like a template so you guys can modify and adjust it. You don't want your demo reel, especially for a student demo reel, to probably be over a minute. And we're probably ballparking around 35 seconds to 40 seconds max on what we're doing. Less is more. All right, think of it that way. We want to put your best foot forward. We want to get across what we're trying to go for and then kind of get out. That's kind of how it works. All right, so as you can see, we have our assets, but if we look at like the most common demo reels, like what else do we kind of need to kind of get this in the ballpark of what we're doing? So we could bring in a couple of different things. So I'll go ahead and start bringing some stuff in. Let's do this. I have a background, so let's bring a background in. That'll be fun for a title screen. All right, boop. Get that in there. Yay. We'll double click again. And let's see, I have some sound, audio file, MP3. That'd be good. So the file formats that I'm importing, this is obviously a JPEG, but you want to try to stay to like a PNG, a Targa, something that has like, it's not compressed, because once we start playing around with it, it's going to get very noisy if you try to like scale up an image because of rasterizing and stuff like that. So try to stay with something that's going to be a little bit larger. Now remember, if it is one of those textures, you want to go bigger and shrink down. So you can't take like a 512 texture and scale it up and expect it to look good. You have to have something really big. So you can go in Photoshop real quick, set up a 1080p resolution, and just make something. Flat backgrounds are fine for basically a title sequence and stuff like that. So I'm gonna start playing. Let's make a title sequence over here, right? So let's kind of go to the beginning, and you can see up here at the top there is something that says title. And you can see new title, and it has all these different things. So this is pretty crazy to kind of look at right away, right? So it's like, let's just go default still here. It's gonna say, are you okay with this resolution? I'm gonna be like, yes, I am. And I'm just gonna call it front title for fun. Alright, in here it basically pops up this window, and it looks like you're editing like right on top of that video footage, but that's just because it's the first thing in the scene. So as we start typing, you can put any information that you want on this, but my suggestion is to keep it nice, short, and brief. First and last name, the discipline, what you're doing, basically getting across like this is who I am and what I'm doing. And then, you know, even some people put like a email address or a social media address here, but you could always put it on the credit screen as well. So we're just going to put Ken Norman, and you guys can edit the fonts. There's different font styles here at the bottom, but I'm going to say keep it as clean as possible. And they're not going to be looking at your fonts, they're going to be looking at your content. So keep your content awesome, and keep your like text really clean so they know it's very clear on who they're actually trying to look at right now. So the size up here, you can see the different sizes. We can change the size to do what we want, and kind of move them around. So, and then again, you could put like a discipline. So I could put character TD or character rigger, whatever you want to put. Character modeler. So something simple, and you know, I really scale that one down a little bit, so really like emphasize your name, something like that. So after we kind of get this to where we want it and you're happy with it, then you can just kind of close up this window, and you can see that you have a new front title like chilling over here in the world, like in your project. So I'm just going to drag that over, and it's going to probably default to like a couple seconds, so that's fine. And we want it to be, we don't want it to be obviously 6 seconds or nothing. So you want it to be like 2 or 3 seconds to kind of, so it's a good thing we can use the timer, so we can be like, all right, 10, 9, 8. So somewhere right there. So if you really wanted to like really like play with this and you're like, that's where I want to be, there's some other ways that we can kind of do this by hitting M. I'm making like a marker, And a marker is just like a placeholder, so we can kind of use that as like a scale reference. You can see how it snaps right to that marker. And you can kind of just go up here and you can say clear marker when you're done. So clear selected marker. And we just kind of use it as a place to know what we're doing. So now I'm going to take these 3 assets and kind of just move them over now. And you can see they're popping to the end of that, like the end of the title sequence, which is cool. And if you wanted them to bleed over a little bit, you can do that yourself. But we're going to go over some of the transitions here in a minute. So you pretty much get that. You got your asset 1, 2, and 3, and then we just got to do a credit screen. So I'll bring in audio. Let's go ahead and bring in some audio for fun. It's going to make me put it on this layer, even though I don't want to. So we're going to add another layer. So to add a layer, you can just kind of come up, and you can see that I'm going to do it anyway, so it's fine. They're going to make me do it this way. Okay, it's fine with me. So we'll just drag it in. Boop, like this. No, I'm not completely happy with that, so let's undo it. Just doing Command Z to undo if anybody ever wants to know. And then just find the insert. That's what they're. No, that's the break. Add marker, timeline. Well, great. Oh, you know, there it is. Just right click. So, right click, say add track. As soon as you say add track, you can say, do you want to do an audio track or you want to do a video track? I'll just do both. Say OK. And basically, I'm just trying to separate it. So it used to be a button, but now it's just click. So even easier. So now we just kind of take this down here. Now, these audio tracks are actually hooked up to the sequences from each of the individual assets. Even though there's no audio in there, potential could be. So now if you want to see this wave output, you just kind of scroll it down. And you can see the wave of the actual MP3 that we brought in here. So if we hit play right now, you can see that there's sound, but you probably can't hear it because it's going through my mic, unless my mic gets close enough to where you can hear it. There we go. So it's one of those things. The website I use to get the audio, in case anybody's curious, it's actually called, I believe it's called Ben Sound. If you go to Google and type it in, Ben Sound is a royalty-free music website where you guys can use it for your basically your social media or your demoreels. It's basically just audio files that are pretty cool. So that's bensound.com. And when you download those, there's different ones. There's like funky, there's acoustic, there's cinematic, you know, can't remember all of them, like rock. And you can just basically choose the best one that fits for you. So I'm just using this as an example. But the cool thing is obviously we haven't played too much over here to see what's going on. So when you see the V1s, like obviously the V all the way up, these are obviously the videos. All right, if you want to turn one off the visibility, you can say toggle output this little eyeball right here. So this all should be pretty easy. The A ones, you probably have already came to the assumption that it's just audio tracks. That's exactly what it is. But if you can't see the end of the MP3, like down here at the bottom, you'll see this little basically bar. And we're just going to kind of move it from left to right. And you can see how it zooms in and zooms out. And sooner or later, you'll see the end of the audio track. So obviously, it's bigger than our demo reels right now, but we haven't even added in our credits yet. So if we wanted to like come over here, and that's like 30, let's see. Let's go right about there. I mean, there's a couple different ways you can do this. We can come over to like this razor tool, which is basically just to see each of these tools. It's like a selection tool. There's a time stretching tool, which is time rate stretch tool right here. But the one I use the most over here is probably going to be the selection and the razor, and because I have other ways to do some of the other stuff. So it's like come here and you can kind of use a marker if you want, and then you can kind of, or you can just kind of click like this. And as soon as you do that, you can see it's separate. And now you can take like the selection tool and just hit delete. So now we can take this and kind of zoom back in. And your clip that you're making, your project, is only going to be as long as the longest thing inside there as you're like outputting. So that's kind of neat. So now we can kind of see everything that's kind of going on. You got your hand, and kind of you can use the hand tool to kind of move left and right if you want to make sure you're getting all the way back to the beginning. So if you zoom in, you're like, hey, I want to get that a little bit more accurate. So now we can kind of take this and you can see that, you know, sometimes a refresh update is going to take a minute, so don't get too alarmed if it doesn't update right away. So after we get this going, What we can do now is first let's go ahead and finish up and add a credit, right? So let's go and get something in there for credits. So we'll do another title sequence from default still, and we'll just call it, you know, in credit or whatever you want to call it, in title, so you don't confuse yourself. So and you can see it still thinks of the it still sees the old one. So on this one, this is where you definitely want to say which give credit to any artist that you use their material in your content, but also you want to be able to put the softwares that you used and definitely your contact information. Make sure that's up there for sure. So because I don't have any of that right now, we're just going to say thanks for watching. Yay. So obviously this is just a placeholder for when you guys actually do add it in your credits, which is fine. So there, again, there's several different things inside of here if you guys want to change the positioning, the opacity of the transforms. But again, I'd rather you keep your basically your title screens very clean, crisp, and to the point. So that's what we're trying to get across. So now that we have that, I can take basically the end title here. Now, you might notice as I'm dragging these in that the front title, or the front title and the end title are pink. That's because it's the raw asset, because it's considered straight from what the green ones are considered the nested ones. Nested meaning I dragged basically the 10-second into an asset, made it a sequence, and then I took that sequence and I drug it into here, which is basically, it's like inception of like nesting here. It's like sequence within a sequence within a sequence to the asset. So the pink ones are just like the raw, like it's just straight up like it could be a JPEG or whatever. So we're not going to leave it like that, because I basically just use that to like get like your stuff where you want it, and like that. And so now you can literally click on it at any point. So you can come over here and use your selection, click on it, click, and right click, and you can say hey nest. And what that does is kind of works in reverse. So we can say, okay, we can actually just call this keep sequence and call it front title. I'll abbreviate front title sequence 1. I don't like sequence 1, sounds weird. And we'll say OK. And you see as soon as we do that, it turns green. So then we come over here to this one and we can do like the same thing. So then we can say boom, in title sequence underscore, because I like underscores. So you can see now they became nested as well. So that means if you, any one of these, since they're nested, you could just use the selection tool like this, and you could double click on them and it'll go into that actual sequence. So you see now it's pink again because we're within inside of it. So think of these, the nesting is kind of like containers. Like if you're moving your house, you put everything inside of a box. So it's kind of like this. We're keeping everything nice and neat and organized by putting it in these little containers. So now we come back to our final project again. You can kind of see boom, 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 boom. All of it's there. And we can definitely cut down our end a little bit to be exactly where we want it to be. So cool. So now that we kind of got that going, so let's just recap. All right, so we're bringing in assets just by literally double clicking over here. And if you run out of space and you can't really see what's going on, so I mean you can always make things bigger, smaller, or switch it to like a list format if you like that. And if this gets like too cumbersome and you can't like find room to just double click because you're like, how else can I get stuff imported? It's just file at the top. So file, import will also do the same exact thing to kind of bring it all down here to the bottom. So each of these different things kind of drag it up. So I'm going to go back to basically this view just because it's more like it's prettier. Let's be honest. So if I still have my 60-second timer up at the top, you can see it still has that in and out points. Like you can clear those in and out points at any time you want, if just by coming up here to basically markers, and it's going to be called clear in and out points. As soon as you do that, it kind of gets it back to basically the raw of the 60 if you wanted to reuse the 60 for something else. But we're going to make a folder now, and in this folder we can start storing whatever we want. So we can just call it demo, and you can drag basically your sequences in here. You can do however you want to do your organization. I just wouldn't keep it all out here because it'll start getting kind of confusing after a while. So let's just take anything that's a sequence and drop it in there for now. So it's like title sequence, bloop, end sequence, bloop, and then each of your assets. So asset 2, 1, and there's 3, free. Cool. And these are kind of like the raw assets. So you can literally make another folder just called assets, you know. So let's do that. Something along those lines. And then we can kind of take those guys and just kind of put them in there too. So it's like boom. And then we got front, audio. Our vitals a sequence too, so we got to move that. So our 10 seconds, our 60 seconds. And then we got this guy, so we'll just put it in the raw assets. And then if you want to leave the final out, you can, just so at least then it's like, okay, this is where it's all being nested. That's fine. Whatever's easiest for you. It's just easier to kind of organize your stuff that way. And trust me, it's like as an artist, everybody's, you know, it's really tough for artists to be like organized. So try to force yourself to do at least a little organization and naming. It's really going to pay off later when you have like 80 things in here and you can't really find anything. So it'd be a better way to go. So now that we kind of got that in there, we run into a couple of things. So I mean, obviously, if we play this right now, if I just hit spacebar and now I'm going to lean forward so you guys can hear. At the top right, you can see it's playing. So it's basically, you know, starts with the title screen, kind of works in. The sound's kind of menacing with this countdown timer, right? Dun, 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 dun. So basically we wanted you to use something really menacing like this so you guys could really stress out before graduation. I'm just kidding. You guys can choose whatever audio file you think best complements what you're trying to achieve. Something, just a side note, I mean, just for future reference. So there's these two types of cuts that they're called like a J cut, and then there's basically an L cut. And basically what it means is like a J means that audio starts before your content. So you can see the audio is definitely starting before content comes in. And then L cut's the same way, where it's like the outside. So it's like your content's here and then it kind of fades out into audio. So this is if you guys want to look more into it, just kind of go to Google and type in a J cut and an L cut and you'll see like tons of podcasts and stuff on it. But I just wanted to kind of throw that term out there so you know it was there. So now we have basically our nested title sequence. And right now it's all considered black. So we can go in and start tweaking this stuff out a little bit. So go into our raw assets again. You can see there's our background that we wanted. So we kind of bring our background in. And kind of see now we have a pretty little background. And, you know, like I said, don't go too crazy on your backgrounds. I don't want any crazy background colors or nothing that draws away from your content. You don't want to turn them off before they even see what you're doing. So now we have that. Go back to your final and see. Because it's nested, it's already kind of updating. And because my background's gray and this is white, we might want to put a stroke around our text or something like that so it really pops out. So we can do the same thing by going to our credit sequence. So we just kind of double click over here, and you know, if we want to stay with the continuity of our reel right now and do that, so we can just be like, bam, there you go. Thanks for watching. You can see that one's definitely burning out. So we definitely want to change the font color or put a stroke around it or a drop shadow or something like that. Now, you can bring in, like I said, you can bring in PSDs. You could bring in you can bring in JPEGs if you want, but just make sure they're high enough resolution. But PNGs, Targas, TIFFs, things like that are going to be the best formats to kind of stay around. So what we're going to do now is just kind of bring in some stuff to play with in just a second. So, but let's finish this up real quick by, see our audio is like very abrupt because we kind of cut it. So any of this stuff can be edited, obviously, and sliced, and you can do in and out points and kind of play around with it. But let's just play with the audio for a minute. So we see the audio is down here, so I'm just going to click on it for a second so you guys can see. And you guys can come over to any of the effects controls. So if I want to take this audio sequence and just have it right here for a second, and you guys can see, like, if I come up here to basically, you can see there's the sound, and you can kind of click on the effects controls, and you can see there is a volume right here, so a volume decimal level, so we can kind of use that to start with. So you can kind of say, okay, I want it to be strong here, so we'll just set this little guy. This toggles like the keyframe. And the keyframes are a little weird. It's not like your My keyframes where you just hit S all the time. You kind of turn it on, and what it does, it looks for a difference. So we kind of take this and we'll just say, toggle it on. So as soon as it's toggled on, it'll start trying to figure out what you're wanting. And then we're going to come over here and just change the decimal level down. And it'll kind of, boom. So you can see it went down, but it didn't go back up. So like I said, it's kind of weird sometimes. So looking for this flat line right here. And now we can kind of take this and put it back to 0. And you'll see that's kind of balancing it back out to where it needs to be. Whoa. Like that. And let's see if the keyframe worked. And of course it did. So let's try this again. Boom. I might have had it on the whole time. So it's at 1. And now we'll take it and pull it down. There we go. That's what we want. Down further. Why not? Really crazy. Let's take it all the way down. So you can see what I was looking for is this little pin thing here. So you see, you could also use the pen tool over here on the left hand side, but I like using the navigation stuff. It's a little easier. So you can see this is kind of showing like your drop off. So again, this is probably something you're familiar with looking like if you used Maya or any 3D package for a while. So they'll have like a keyframe here, and at the top of the timeline you're used to that, and then at the bottom of the timeline it's considered a constant value up to that point. And then we basically have an end off. So if you wanted to do it at the beginning too, you can, but we started at the beginning of the song, so it sounds kind of normal. So then we got this, and we kind of fall off at the end, so that way it doesn't really abrupt, and it just kind of tapers off now, instead of it like keep going and crazy. And you guys can choose how much you want it to taper. That is up to you. And again, this is a way to keyframe. Any of these things will have keyframes if you click on them under the effects controls. Most of your raw assets will have some kind of keyframes. Some of your sequences will have keyframes, which we'll play with in just a minute. So, but I think we're finally to a point where we can start adding in some just fun assets to kind of play around with. So if I come back over here to basically asset 1, you can see the countdown timer is cool, but again, it was just kind of a placeholder. So I'm going to go ahead and just make sure I'm saving as I'm going. Alright, so now that I have that, I can kind of come over here, just double click on asset 1 using the selection tool, double click, and now I can see that I'm inside that sequence. So I'm going to bring in some more assets that we want to be our first sequence. So this would be stuff that you developed in either a Nuke or maybe another Premiere or even a render from Maya or something along those lines, or even just a play blast. So I'm going to double click first. And let's bring in Chevy with sound. This will be a good one. So it's always hard when you have, like, let's say if your discipline is like something that's stagnant. So meaning if it's a still life or if it's a vehicle or a prop. I mean, obviously the character riggers can move the rigs, the animators have animation, the visual effects artists have stuff that's exploding. So the trick is to come up with a creative way to actually show it off. Now, in still life, basically you're 99% of the time you're following a reference image, so you don't want to like overdo it. You want to just have just a little bit to kind of show that it's 3D. So basically moving like, I don't know, 20 grid units to the left to kind of see that it's a round surface basically. But cars, you know, I always tell people for cars and stuff like that to kind of look at car shows and see what they do that makes it creative and stuff like that. And we won't 100% like this either, so we'll change it a little bit as well. So we can kind of bring this in and say, okay, boom, there we go. So the first thing you might notice is that it's already going over our 10-second part that we wanted to go to. So right now we're at 13 seconds. So, and obviously the resolution isn't right. So you bring it in, you're looking at 1080, and then you bring it in this little bitty clip, and you're like, what did I do? All right. So this is what I was saying. You guys need to make sure that you're rendering out as high as you can to really help out. But for something that's like a wireframe or something you think that it won't distort too much as you're scaling it up, I can show you. So what I suggest, if it's this size, is to basically move this guy around. So we're going to come over here, and I'm just going to drag him up here real quick. So it's like, bloop, there we go. Oh, gotta be over here. Take your little dude, kind of move it up here for a second. And then you can see, like just by grabbing that, you can see it's up here. It basically looks like the same thing, but you can see it says source. So now we can kind of come over here and you can adjust it. So it's like we come over here and you see there's position, scale. So as we use the scale, you can kind of move it up to be that 100% if that's really what you want. And sometimes, you know, it's not too bad, but you can see how it's starting to get a little blocky and a little anti-aliasing on the sides here. So if you're happy with the 100%, what I would suggest is putting multiple things on the screen and just changing the position. So like you could do like a colored version of this car in the top left, and then you could do like a wireframe on the right, and just kind of have it all exposed, because people that are viewing your Demoreels, if they really like it, they'll rewind. So you can kind of have it all exposed right here so you can kind of see what's going on. But like again, just to show you that you can scale stuff like that, that's what you need to see. So it's like, let's go back and kind of get this stuff back. And all this stuff can be animated. Again, it has a little stopwatch over here that you guys can click on. And kind of put that back in the middle. And we'll scale it back up to be kind of big. There we go. So we fixed the scale issue, obviously, but now we have the timing issue because, again, we wanted everything to happen within basically 10 seconds on this basically sequence. So what I'm going to do is we're going to break the rules a little bit. Watch this. So we can take this right here and right-click, and you'll see there's something called speed and duration, right? So right there. And here, it'll tell you the time. So, you know, in my mind, you're like, I want it to go slower, so you'll type in 90. But going slower actually adds more time, so you want it to go faster. So we're going to put it up to like 130. And you're seeing, trying to get it within that 10 second margin. So we'll say 2, almost there, 3, getting it, 4, a little more, 6. All right, we're going to 40. Boom. 42, almost 41, perfect. So, and by doing that, obviously this clip actually has audio. So I'm gonna just play this. I'm gonna lean forward and hit play real quick. But by doing that, obviously the sounds sound like sped up and distorted now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come over to the final where it's all being nested together, and you can see it has its own audio track, which is here. And if we don't like this audio track, you can literally just mute it by saying mute track there. Or the other option is to come over to these guys. Now they're considered linked right now. And if you ever download a file and you just want the audio of it or just the image of it, you can always do this. So you can right click here. And let's see, I'm going to find it. I'm going to find the one I'm looking for here. Oh, we got to do it inside of the asset. Asset 1. So you can see it's got its little deal down here. So we can right click here. Let's try it. There we go. I will find what I'm looking for. I want to... No. Enable. Okay, I'm fine with it. So, I don't want to really physically delete it though. No, we can. I'll just delete it since it's a sequence. So it's like you can delete it out of here completely, so it's no longer an option. So it's no longer looking at its audio track. So in some cases, if it's a quick time, because this is a sequence, I guess I didn't have to. You can right click on it. Let me show you where it's at. And there's this thing called unlink. And unlink it will let you do what I just did, where you can kind of click on them and just hit delete. So if that comes up, there's your workaround. So we don't really need any of these audio tracks unless you are doing like a lip sync or something. So you want to like keep that audio track of your lip sync, but then still keep your master music track in the final like tab here. So for your output, so that's kind of nice. So now we have our assets, and as we hit play here, I'm gonna turn down my volume a little bit because the volume after a while gets kind of annoying. So I'm gonna hit space bar so you can kind of see the whole reel kind of come together. And you can see boom, 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 boom. And if you don't like this popping, like the stuff that where it looks like it's supposed to be the car vibration, you can literally go in and you could take it up to the source and do in and out points and do creative editing to kind of take those pops out and just piece together your own sequence. It's kind of fun. So far everything's been very, very, very harsh. It's like transitions between everything. So if we wanted to add some kind of transition effect or a cross dissolve or a wipe or something along those lines, like the easiest way to do it is to kind of use the selection tool. Kind of come here and boop, click it, and I'm just going to do Command D, and that's going to add basically a cross dissolve on each side. I'll do it for each of the assets. And what's interesting is, I don't know if you guys can see them, but they're starting to show up. If I just zoom in here, so if I take this guy and just kind of zoom in, you can see the cross dissolve. Now if it's happening too quick or not long enough, you can just kind of double click on them. It'll give you the duration to which you could change. So remember, it's frames, seconds, minutes, hours, basically. That's kind of how it works. And that's universal for everything. So inside here it says cross dissolve, but if you wanted to change the effect to like something else, I'm not requiring you guys to do that by any means, but you can come down here and you kind of see there's different ones, like there's dissolve and the page wipes and stuff like that. You just drag it over top of that one and it'll replace it. So, but for me, cross dissolve's fine. So just wanted to let you know that's there. I don't want you to get too crazy again with the dissolves and stuff. I just wanted to kind of be, so you can see now that we added a dissolve, we almost want to overlap them a little bit. So we'll take this and kind of pull it over. You will go over. I will make you go over. We'll stretch you a little bit. It's getting hung up on that transition out. There we go. I'll just move everything forward that way. So there we go, and then the car comes right in. So that's kind of nice. So, but me moving that over, I'm sure I kind of moved everything off a little bit too. So we can kind of come over here, just kind of scrub through it. You can see again, crosses off. So if there's, again, you can overlap them. You can choose different dissolves. You can do wipe. And you can add as many tracks in here as you want, so you can keep adding like more video tracks. So you can just kind of, again, right click, say add track. You can say audio, and you can keep stacking stuff in here. Now I'm trying to keep it all kind of clean and put it in a nest and stuff, but you can layer stuff inside here. So you could have a couple of different assets on top. You can have a title on top of your asset one that's explaining what this is. So it's really just, for me, your Demoreel should be really quick, like a little trailer of your life, basically. Going through and explaining real quickly, this is what I do, and showing off all your best assets forward, and have your audio in here. So kind of the last thing I want to like leave you with, and then try to get you guys to explore and a little bit on your own, is just bringing in like images and things like that. So let's bring in one more thing. So again, this was our car sequence, and so we're going to take our car and just put it into the raw for now. Alright, and then we're going to double click again, and what I did is I asked Sean Reinhardt, who is a course director in the PCC classes, to kind of donate some artwork for us to use. It's basically renders that are like 4K and really big, stuff like that. So we'll kind of bring in just a couple just to kind of test some stuff out. So we'll take, let's just do that one for fun. Kind of bring that in like this. And again, these would be considered raw assets for me. So you can kind of take them and kind of put them into your raw folder, but we'll leave them here just as we're organizing. So again, this would be like an asset 2 thing. So if I go back into asset 1 real quick, I mean, at any time you can go in and you can delete that 10-second timer, just take it out. It was there just as a placeholder. So as you guys finish projects throughout your time in your final classes, you can just go in and swap this out. So you're constantly building your Demoreel, and you're constantly looking at your brand and constantly getting stuff updated for like your Demoreel, so you're not stressed out at the end trying to edit everything together. So you know, directors do this all the time, especially for animated films. They look at majority of the actual film in storyboard format or animatic format before it's even been made in the computer, and they keep editing. So they probably watch the movie like 1,000 times, and you know, kudos to those guys, because that's challenging. So just wanted to let you know that's what we can do. So by doing this, we can kind of use our selection tool, click on asset 2, and you can see we have our 10-second timer in here, and now we can start bringing in basically our other images to kind of play around with. And we can do this in 2 separate sequences if we really wanted to. So we have, why not? Let's just do it for fun, right? So what we can do is go underneath basically our Demoreel, and for asset 2, we can actually choose 2 different assets, or we can do it all within here. So let's just do it here. Why not? I changed my mind. So we can start with like the beauty. The beauty. There we go. Like that. And then we can bring in this guy. Like that. So as we scrub this, you can see they're ending right about there. So about 5 seconds a piece. But you can see, like, just by looking at them, you're like, it looks like some wood, because they're so big. So we're going to click on them and just kind of use the selection tool again, and you always just toss it up. Oops, I grouped that up like that. Double click it, and it'll kind of do that too. So you can go up to source, and then we can kind of come up here and go to basically motion or effects, and you got your positioning and scale. So if you want to scale it down, you can, and then basically the tall ones are always the hardest ones to show off, because you want to come up with some creative ways to actually show it, because there is a lot of good stuff going on here, and you don't want to miss it because you're so zoomed out. Now remember, we're looking at 1080p. I just have it shrink to 25% because of my screen. So we can get creative, and we can put like a render on the left side, and you know, and then come over here and I can even overlap these. Let's just do that. Just poop like that and expand it like that. Kind of see what I scaled the other one to. So I think it said like 0.9. 0.9. So come over here and do the same thing. We'll say, I bet you it's going to be 0.10 because it's the shaded one. So it's, and even that's just a little off because of rendering aspect ratios and stuff. So now we got that, and I'll just kind of move it over. And again, you can animate these. So my suggestion would be to have like a nice beauty one of the whole thing here, and maybe a wireframe that's going to be switching up and down, and maybe the third one you can have like, we'll duplicate one just for fun. So add a new track. Come on, computer. It's freaking out because I have this tab open. Hang on a second. Click, 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 click. There you go. Add track. Now it'll let me. So we say OK. So we'll add one more track. And I'll just take this original one here. Why not? And just drag it in here. Expand it up. That. And then we can kind of use this one right here. And we can kind of change its scale. And then just kind of move it over. And you can have this one kind of like animated, like scrolling throughout that 10 seconds, so you can keep a little bit more detail. So we're kind of, you know, shrink it down just a little so I can see a little bit more. Too much. Keep it somewhat decent size. Move it over. There's some creative ways to do this, and I am going to put some examples of some Demoreels that have some really good transitions and way they like to display stuff. And so I want you guys to be, for me, it's like you want to keep it nice and clean, keep as much on the screen as possible within a short amount of time and showing off what we want, but don't go too crazy with your editing and your animation. That's just too over the top. So keep this here so they can see the final composition, but obviously we could even use this for like a scrolling purposes. So, and you can divide stuff to be more even, but I'm trying to get the point across right now. So we'll say position, we'll just set basically a keyframe. Beep. Now our keyframe is on, and we can kind of choose how we want it to go. So I'm going to say, move that over real quick. Alright, don't touch it ever again. So I'm going to scroll for the beginning here. Basically using my left mouse button and moving it left to right to use the scrolls for any of the scrolls in here. So if we're at the top, which we were pretty close, and now we can change obviously our time. Go to the end here, and then we can kind of take this guy and just really take it crazy. So you can see it's kind of moving. I'm using this as like a reference to know where I'm at. So there we go. You're basically trying to find the bottom. So the idea is now if we scrub the timeline, you can see it's kind of scrolling. So if we go back to the final now, I just scrub. So first we have our opening title sequence. We have our asset. And then we can kind of cross this all into like a scrolling something. So you can go sideways, up and down. You can change the opacity. So at this point, again, this is pretty, like I would call this the from the sky, the 50,000 feet view of Premiere, basically. So you could take this and kind of drag it into like raw assets. All right, and leave the final out here, and then make sure you hit save. And last but not least, I mean, if you're completely happy, because you're going to spend some time editing and putting some sound in there and make sure you really are happy with your Demoreel. For specifications on what I want on the title screen and the credit screen and stuff like that, I'll put that on the FSO or the documentation that you'll have for this video. But other than that, the only last thing you need to know is basically coming over here and going to export media on the final. So we'll just kind of grab the final, make sure we're active. Come over here, and you can see export media. And as soon as that comes up, we're going to be using QuickTime. We are going to be using, let's see what we got here. NTSC widescreen. Uh, yeah, I mean we could do that, or we could do the HD 1080i. Basically what we're looking for is a H.264 because that's going to be the compression that's going to make this really small. You can also see about different sizes right here too. It'll automatically let you make a different size if you need one that's smaller. But this guy is obviously going to be the biggest one that you're going to need, which is the 1080. So we can say, okay, that's fine. Leave it there. And we could check down here if we like the audio, the video settings, the codec settings, and stuff like that. So I'm going to switch it. H.264, bloop, like that. Audio, fine. I mean, if you want to put a compression in there, you can. MPEG-4 is always good. But you gotta be careful on that, so not all players will play some of these funky ones that are in here. And as soon as you're done with that, only thing you have left to do is hit export. So as soon as you export, it'll actually go through and actually render it all out. These renders will go pretty quick. It's not like my renders. Probably take you 10 minutes to an hour, depending on how much you put in. You could also change the output name and the location in which it's going. So, like I said, this is like a brief overview, and it was like 90 miles an hour to kind of get you started in how to actually develop something for your Demoreel. And so just a real quick check, all of our assets here at the bottom left. We use the source window for most of our like real quick cuts and tweaking out the actual files, and then what we saw on the right was our final output, and the right bottom was basically our timeline and our editing sequences together. So I hope you enjoy this, and I hope it's very helpful, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing your Demoreels. Thanks.